Welcome back everyone, got another deck profile today. This is actually one that I made a while ago and just realized I never actually got around to recording, which is sad because this was one of my favorite decks. I was super excited waiting for starter deck 6 for so long. Sorry, starter deck 7. This is my updated Greymon Rush video. I made one a while back, I believe it was for the BT5 format. This is just a much better, I think, stronger version that I've been having a lot of fun with. Basically, the goal is to rush our opponent down with a bunch of Agumons and Greymons, all buffing each other up and kind of just spamming the board as quickly as we can. So we're not going to be digivolving up to any level 6s in this deck, just because that's not the goal. Instead, we're going to be trying to hit as fast as we can with as many low-level Digimon as we can in this deck. So kind of like a red Agumon kind of version of a rookie rush. But I've been having a ton of fun with this deck. I hope you will too, so let's get into it and see how it works. So starting off with our Digitama, we are running 4 copies of the BT5 Koromon, super awesome card. When attacking, once returned, if this Digimon has Omnimon or Greymon in its name, trigger draw 1. Super nice and helpful, basically just going to be helping to make sure we get some extra draw every time we swing at our opponents with some Greymon. Extra cards are always good. And then moving on, we have BT6, probably at least one of my favorite red Digitama now. When this Digimon attacks a player, it gets plus 1000 DP for the turn. So just very straightforward, helps buff our Digimon a little bit harder when they're going in for the swing, which is especially nice in this deck since we are swinging with a lot of smaller Digimon. The more chance we have of them surviving, the better. And then starting off, we have 4 copies of the promo Agumon, probably one of my favorite Agumons. During your turn, while this Digimon has Greymon in its name, plus 2000 DP, so just really strong, especially since this is a Greymon focused deck. Any Greymon deck this Agumon is awesome in, so we're running 4 copies of him. And then next up, we're running also 4 copies of the new starter set 7 Agumon. When attacking, if this Digimon attacks player, it gets plus 2000 DP for the turn. So again, helping to make sure our Greymon can swing a little bit harder and give them the best chance possible of living through their attack so we can hit hard again with them the next turn. And plus 2000 is very good for both of these Digimon, so it really helps out with our Greymon. And then moving on for our last buffing Agumon, we have just the starter deck 1 Agumon. During your turn, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. So just a straight flat buff. 1000 is weaker than the others, but it's still a buff, and it's nice that it doesn't have any conditions. It's just plus 1000. And then next up, we have some Agumon that are here to just help us search through the deck a little bit more. So we're running 4 copies of BT5 Agumon. On play, reveal 3 cards from the top of our deck. Add 1 Digimon with Greymon in its name among them to your hand and place remaining on the bottom of your deck in any order. Really awesome, since the majority of our cards in this deck are going to be Greymon. So really nice, especially since we are running Nokia in this deck, so she combos really well with her, which I'll explain at the end if you're new to the game or just don't really play a lot. But just really nice to help us thin through our deck and then get even more cards in addition to some of the other searching we have. And then last up, we have on play, reveal 5 cards from the top of your deck, add 1 Tamer card among them to your hand, place the remaining cards at the bottom of our deck in any order. So really useful. Tamers are super important in this deck, specifically Nokia, so if we don't have her in our starting hand, it's nice to be able to have this Agumon to help search through 5 cards. It's a pretty good amount of cards to search through, to add 1 of her to our hand, and help set us up for future turns. Nokia is very important. She's pretty much the linchpin of this deck. Her effect on play, you may play 1 Agumon from your hand without paying its memory cost, so really nice. And then also during our main phase, when digivolving one of our Digimon into a Digimon card in our hand with Garurumon, Omnimon, or Greymon in its name, you may suspend it to reduce the cost of Digivolution by 1. So essentially, Nokia will just help make sure all of our Digivolutions are cheaper, and also lets us play a free Agumon when it comes out. So works super well if we have a Nokia in the starting hand, especially if you have Nokia. Play Agumon for free. We can play our BT5 Agumon and then also get a free search from that, or maybe play this Agumon to try to get a second Tamer to look for a second Nokia or a copy of Marcus. So both of these Agumon work really well with Nokia's effect to play a free Agumon once she comes out. So moving on to our Greymon, our first copy, probably the main Greymon we want to see in this deck, which is super awesome. During your turn, while this Digimon has an Agumon Digivolution card, it gains Security Attack plus 1, which is super nice. So ideally, you're going to have this Greymon with either of these 2 Agumon up here to give it that extra 2000 attack, so you're going to be swinging with 7000 for 2 security. Very nice too if it's really early on in a game. 7,000 attack isn't the most amazing, but the potential is there to get those 2 checks, especially if you end up just hitting rookies or some weaker champions. You have a pretty good shot of him living, so it's kind of luck of the draw, but either way, being able to check 2 security this early in the game is very nice if you Digivolve into him. And then next up, we are running 4 copies of our new GeoGreymon from Starter Deck 7. One of my favorite Greymons. One, the art just looks cool, but also he gets to play himself from security, which is always very fun. And on play, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 4,000 DP or less, which is nice because that happens whether you're playing him from the hand or whether he plays himself from security. So an extra Digimon with the potential for a little bit of removal is very nice. And then last, for our Greymon, we are running 4 copies of the BT3 Security Greymon. Weaker and doesn't have any special effects, but he can summon himself from security without paying its cost if you attack him there. So essentially, again, the goal of this deck, just get as many Greymon out there as you can. So it's really fun between the 2 of these. We have a pretty good chance of every game being able to get at least 1, if not 2, just free Greymon out there if the luck is with us. So being able to get these out really helps with the pressure, and if you're playing against something like Rookie Rush or just anyone who has current rookie out, the chance to delete them with GeoGreymon is pretty nice since you can delete most rookies and even some champions out there, so just the removal helps. And then our last champion, we're running 3 copies of Monochromon because it is important to at least have some blockers. And he's 1 to Digivolve into, which is really nice, really cheap. So especially if we don't have Nokia out yet at the beginning of the game, being able to Digivolve up for 1 is very nice. And then Nokia will help us any of these Greymon. If we even have 1 Nokia, as long as they're not in a breeding area, we can Digivolve for 1 using her effect. And if we have multiple Nokia out, really nice, because then we could potentially Digivolve for free, get that card draw, maybe we Digivolve again, or play another Digimon. And moving on to our first level 5, we have a Digimon I totally forgot existed in this game until recently, when I was making this deck, BT3 MetalGreymon. So the main reason we're playing in this deck is piercing. Super awesome. Even if our opponents have some blockers out there, he's going to be able to get straight through them and still check security. 7,000 will get through most level 4 lower blockers and even some higher level ones. But added with the DP boost we can potentially get from our Agumon and our DemiMeramon, very nice. He has a good chance of swinging for at least 9,000 if we have one of those under there, which will get him through most blockers level 5 or lower, which means he should be safe from them. And even outside of blockers, piercing is very nice because your opponent has a suspended Digimon. You can take them out and check a security. Really cool. So probably my favorite level 5 in this deck, the main one I personally want to see. And then the others are a couple kind of situation ones. So Skullgreymon, realistically you could probably take 1 copy of him out to switch to 4 copies of the MetalGreymon, but he's mostly in here just because on play you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon with blocker, and this can potentially be really useful against level 6 blockers or any really high level blockers your opponent might throw out there. Being able to get a body on board and delete him can be useful. Definitely a more situational card, but it's come up enough that I like him in the deck. But like I said, you could probably reduce him to 1 to run 4 copies of him, since just a piercing combo with some of the extra DP is very useful in this deck. And then we're running 1 copy of RizeGreymon. During his main effect, Digiverse 2, you may play a red or yellow tamer card with a play cost of 4 or less from your hand without paying its memory cost. So pretty nice. The reason we're only running 1 is because 1, we're also going to be running Trident Revolver in this deck, but 2, we're only running 2 copies of Marcus. RizeGreymon cannot bring out Nokia since she's a white tamer. It would be awesome if you could, but because he only really has synergy with Marcus, we're only going to be running 1 copy of him because he's nice to see. And then we're just trying to run a handful of level 5s. 1, because our goal isn't really to Digivolve up, but it's nice to be able to get that card draw, or if we need something a little bit stronger to swing over any blockers our opponent might have. And then moving on to our option cards, we're first running 2 copies of Trident Revolver. I love this card. This card's mostly here just because the combo potential is insane. So for 6 cost, delete one of your opponent's Digimon of 6,000 DP or less. Not the greatest, but you may then play a tamer card with play cost 4 or less from your hand without paying its memory cost. This means you could play either Marcus or Nokia, which gives you a lot of value, potentially deleting something while also getting a tamer. And my favorite part, if you have Trident Revolver, which lets you play a Tamer, and then you also have a Nokia in your hand which you play, that means you can also play an Agumon or Gabumon. And again, if it's one of these searching ones, you can also search for either a Greymon or a Tamer. Just lots of combo potential there when you actually have all of those in your hand. So just really nice, potentially gives us huge value for one card. So we are running 2 copies of this, whether it's in your security or your hand, it can be a useful card. And then next up for our next option, we're running 3 copies of Gaia Force. Just very nice. Delete one of your opponent's Digimon. Who doesn't love deleting things? Very good, and just because we don't have any big Digimon in here, Gaia Force is our main answer to any super powerful threats our opponent might have on the field. And then last up, running 1 copy of Atomic Blaster, just because it's very useful for things like Rookie Rush or anyone with a very wide board. Choose any number of your opponent's Digimon whose total DP adds up to 8,000 or less and delete them. Flexible and nice. I guess you could potentially run a second copy and get rid of one of these. I just found having one of them was useful enough in this deck. And then last up, we have our Tamers, 2 copies of Marcus Damon. Start your turn, if you have 2 memory or less, set your memory to 3. And then during your turn, when one of your Digimon Greymon and its name attacks, you may suspend this Tamer to gain 1 memory. Really nice effect, makes it that every time we attack with our Greymon, we also will be able to get some extra memory back to either Digivolve up, play another Agumon, play another Greymon, or just use it for any purpose we need to make our turns a little bit longer. But I found Nokia was better, so I am only running 2 copies of him. If there was a card I was gonna cut, I would definitely cut one of either 1 Gaia Force or Atomic Blaster for a 3rd Marcus Damon, but I always felt having 2 was fine, especially since there's a lot of good potential for drawing cards and searching between the Koromon and the Agumons in this deck, and because there's a lot of cheap evolutions we can get, it's usually, as long as you get a good starting hand, pretty easy to get through your Digivolutions and draw up. So when I was playtesting, I felt like that helped with only running 2 copies, because even though we were only running 2, I was usually able to see him pretty consistently as long as my first couple turns went well, so I didn't feel the need to run more of him. And then last but not least, 4 copies of Nokia. I already explained what she did, but she is the main reason this is a deck that I like. Just super awesome to be able to play an Agumon or Gabumon for free, / being able to reduce the Digivolution cost of our Greymon. Really helps us get a lot of memory efficient turns if we're able to get her out. 4 copies because ideally you're going to see her in your first turn. Best thing that can happen pretty much is 2 Agumon in your starting hand with a Nokia. That way you're Digivolving up into your first Agumon for free from your Digi-Egg, getting that card draw, playing Nokia, and then getting an extra Agumon out there, who ideally is going to be one of these 2 to also help us search another card during our first turn. But yeah, that is the deck, everyone. Just super fun having 2 different Greymon that can come out from security. Nokia's super awesome Tamer. Lots of fun shenanigans with some of our options here, especially Trident Revolver. And we just have so many Agumon and Greymon now that it's really fun to be able to make tons of different decks out of them, whether it's kind of like a typical Digivolving up to War Greymon, whether it's a War Greymon and Omnimon deck, or a low-level Rush one like this. Originally, I was running some copies of the 2-cost Agumon that's one to Digivolve into. The main reason I stopped running him is it's really shitty if turn 1 he's the only Agumon in your hand and you now have to pay to Digivolve into your first rookie. So it felt safer just running all of these, plus all of these have very good effects now that are important for either buffing our Greymon or getting some searches in through our deck to help thin it out a little bit. And then MetalGreymon is just such a nice ultimate to have in this deck. When I made my original version, I did not run any copies of him because I forgot he existed, but just piercing is very useful in this deck and helps make sure that even if our opponents have blockers, they're not going to be able to slow us down, and the potential to just kill one of our opponent's suspended Digimon while still checking security helps things move nicely and makes this deck hopefully end your opponent a little bit faster. Your most expensive cards are probably going to be the promo Agumons and maybe the promo Greymon. Other than that, last I checked, most of these cards were pretty affordable. Maybe the RizeGreymon might be a bit expensive too. Ignore the cost here because that's not accurate. This deck in general would be mostly a cheaper one, so it's nice, fun, simple deck to use. And if you're a fan of Agumon and Greymon, then it's super fun to play as I'm just focusing on this line. But thank you all for checking out the video. I should have a couple more deck profiles coming out this week, and I'm going to try to keep them up coming out. And if I have time, actually record some gameplay of games with these decks. Hope you enjoyed the video. Consider subscribing if you did, and see you all in the next one.